All right, thanks Rob for that nice introduction, and thanks everyone for having me here. As Rob pointed out, Jill did email me a week or so ago with a request that I come here and talk to you all about how big this problem is with ice. And I will do that, but I'd also like to start by just giving you a bit of a background about what AAIC does, how it got started, and what we sort of plan to do. We've got a pretty big plan over the next 12 months to hopefully make a real difference and I guess get some kids to not take the drug and get some people to get off the drug. So just in terms of the background, it all started when this lady, has any of you met Andrea? Mm-hmm. Andrea was a very successful businesswoman on the Gold Coast. She was a singer, songwriter, actor, did sort of musical theatre and film work. She had two beautiful teenage daughters, but somehow, at the age of 40, she found herself on the streets of Melbourne, basically homeless and just using $500 worth of ice a day. After 18 months of recovery and 2 years in addiction, so Andrea sort of smoked, well, as she said, she smoked 3 houses, a Mercedes, all the jewellery, and come home $67,000 in debt after 2 years of addiction. 18 months of recovery, which she'll tell you was pretty rugged, suicidal thoughts and real difficulties. She got through it and she was invited to speak at a school on the Gold Coast. She went to that school and basically the engagement with those kids was amazing, and so Andrea realised that this lived experience that she had would actually be hugely beneficial in connecting with young kids and basically getting their attention to listen about what this drug is. And also she started getting a lot of inquiries from families who've got kids struggling with ice, or even people who are themselves struggling with ice addiction and wanted to try and find a pathway into recovery.
Hi, my name's Andrea Simmons and I'm the founder of the Australian Anti-Ice Campaign. The Australian Anti-Ice Campaign was founded in order to raise awareness and educate our community, particularly youth, on the dangers of the drug called ice. You see, 8 years ago I was introduced to an ice pipe. I had no idea what it was, and I certainly had no idea what it was about to do to me. It was introduced to me by somebody that I cared about, somebody that I trusted and had known for 13 years. And I really didn't think it was a big deal to have a bit of a puff of a little glass pipe, not knowing the entrapment and the hell that it was going to take me to. Ice took from me everything that I owned. It separated me from my family, from my friends, from my work, and from myself. Ice took me to a place where I was having severe mental health issues. I was suicidal. I was in psychosis. And I was locked down away from society in what we call Ice World. It was a really scary place to be, and I don't wish that upon my worst enemy. After a year and a half of recovery, I was asked to speak in a school and to share what ice did and stole from me, and how ice had left me scarred for life with kidney and heart issues and memory retention problems. And when I did that, I saw the impact that lived experience journey can have on explaining the realities of ice. And AAIC was birthed in order to unveil that enemy, not only to the community but specifically to our youth who are at high risk of being offered this drug today. Every day I wake up and I think, how many more kids are going to be offered this drug? How many more lives are going to be stolen? How many more families destroyed? We've made it our mission at AAIC to get in front of as many youth as we can, to protect them from the destruction that ice brings. But we're also helping people that are in ice addiction and wanting help. We help them create a pathway into detoxes, rehabs and recovery. Every life is valuable. Everyone is somebody's brother, sister, mother, or loved one. And we're asking you to help today. As community-minded people, you can help make a difference. There's various ways that you can get involved, but together in unity, we can put the freeze on ice in our nation.
So that's the two things that AAIC does, essentially, is education, try and stop young people, not only young people, but that's our focus, and also just having what we call lived experience buddies to help people out of addiction. All of those buddies are people like Andrea who have come through addiction and are now in long-term recovery. Most of them, and they're all around Australia, are also people that Andrea and AAIC helped 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago to get clean, and now they come back as volunteers and give back by helping other people who are in the same situation they were in. So it's a bit of a self-perpetuating thing. It's largely volunteer-based. We are about to launch a community ambassadors program, which is what I specifically want to talk to you about at the end of the night, and hopefully get your club to support that. Just looking at the extent of the problem, this is 2022 wastewater sampling. And what it showed back in 2022, the red ones up the top are 2 Australian testing events at different times. So it just showed that Australians are either the highest per capita users of ice in the world or very close to it. Nearly $8 billion worth of ice either injected, smoked or taken as a tablet or some other form orally every year. $21 million worth of ice being consumed every single day. So this is a $1.29 billion seizure. I think that was seized in Canada or China before it got here. This is an example of a meth lab that was busted in Melbourne that had the capacity to produce $60 million worth of ice every week. But the other problem that police have, and border forces and everyone who's trying to stop the supply of this drug, is not only can be made in these labs, but it can be made in the back of a car, in the boot of a car, or a rental property, or a caravan, or a boat. The supply will never stop. So we know that the only real option for us is to try and stop the demand. I think everybody in this room knows that ice is a problem for our country. I don't think a lot of people fully comprehend, and some of you may, I don't know what your professions are, but the extent of the impact on young people in Australia. And I just want to sort of address that a little bit. There's a lot of research way back in 2018 to show that young people are far more likely to start using ice, and they often use it in a binging type of way, which is really dangerous, and therefore they're far more likely to become dependent or addicted to the drug. Why? Again, we probably all know that a teenage person's, all the synapses and neurological connections in the brain aren't even developed yet. And all of a sudden, they're getting basically a drug that's just a concoction of all of these poisonous chemicals, and it's going into their body, into that young brain. This is what happens to a kid, or to anyone who uses ice for the first time. Our baseline dopamine level, which is the chemical that makes us feel good, is around 100%. If we do something like, well, I forgot what that is. If we do something like, I don't do that either, I'll do that, but I used to. So someone likes having a couple of glasses of wine, it might go to 250. Cocaine will go to about 350. Methamphetamine over 1,000%, in some instances 1,200% dopamine rush. They get this massive euphoric rush where they feel, and they're told they're going to be like Superman, and they feel like Superman, and that is why there's such a rapid addiction potential, because the brain just craves to have that again. 10 times more enjoyment than you've ever experienced in your life. Our brain wasn't meant to have that. And so what goes up must come down. Dopamine depletion, so that overstimulation of the brain, the receptors start to deplete, and then all of a sudden the ice user's got very little dopamine left. So severe withdrawal and depression is just almost follows ice use like night follows day. Probably the harshest study that I've seen over the last few years is this one, because you might think, oh, it's an ice addict, he's that crazy person running around with sores and skinny bloke and coppers chasing him, and he's been on it for 10, 15 years. This is kids who've taken ice 5 or 6 times reputable organisation found that they have brainwave patterns and physical movement patterns similar to early onset Parkinson's after 5 or 6 uses. In July last year, they released figures to show that 83% of kids committing youth crime in Queensland are using ice. Is that a shocking statistic, or is it just me? I would have thought 20 or 25 perhaps. 83% of them, and they're kids from 12 through to 17. He talks down the bottom here how he's personally watched a 12-year-old girl inject ice into her arms. 1 in 3 kids in Queensland taken by child services, they've got parents using ice. In that time that precedes the kids being taken, what we see is young kids growing up in this totally dysfunctional situation where there's often domestic violence, poverty because of the drug use, and just neglect. We know that there's going to be severe pre-birth and possibly lifetime health problems, just like, not identical to, but probably similar to fetal alcohol syndrome. So we're creating a huge problem. We've got a permanent contract with Queensland Youth Justice out at Brisbane and Westmoreton detention centres. We go there every fortnight and do 3 separate workshops for groups of kids. And then late last year, that was increased to do one-on-one support with the kids, because we didn't know at the time 83% of them were using ice, but we were called in there because the staff knew that it was high. But there's just been more and more kids coming forward saying, I'm using ice, when I get out I don't want to do it. So they hook up with what we call our buddies. So people like Andrea, who've got that lived experience, of connect with that young boy or girl, talk to them about their future, put a plan in place for their release, and then stick with them and sort of guide them and walk them into recovery after they leave. We've had incredible results from Youth Justice, as you can see there. What's happening right now is our new Premier seems like a really good bloke. I think you might know David, do you, Jill?
Yes, the club does.
We will do.
Yeah.
We will do.
And they've, as you might know, they've brought in these massive funding opportunities, up to $340 million over 4 years to help with youth justice. So we really feel we're a big chance of expanding that significantly with that funding. We hopefully will have a meeting with David shortly, but Michael Crandon is also one of our ambassadors and he's really supporting us. So hopefully we'll expand that. We're also now looking, based on those reports, to get into the youth justice systems in all the other states and territories. So we're looking to move ahead a fair bit this year, and that's one area. We also have our buddies. So as I said, a lot of people who have come through addiction, not all of them, but a lot of them are then drawn to give back and help other people. And as it says at the top there, that can often be beneficial to the person providing the help. So someone who's been through addiction, Andrea, one of our other buddies, have dragged them out, they've got clean, they might have done rehab, and then the last part of their recovery is to give back. It's basically the 12th step in most 12-step programs. And I guess solidify their own recovery by just being there and talking about it more and helping some other people. But what we know is that all of that youth justice stuff and that is really, what we've got to do is prevention rather than cure. So that's really rewarding. We have people, hundreds of people who are clean from this drug that Andrea can put in a belt and say, we're responsible for that person having a new life. But we know, to use that waterfall analogy that is often used, it's better to build a safety net at the top than a hospital at the bottom. And I think with ICE, you can add prison and cemetery. And that's what you need at the bottom of that waterfall. So we're going to get up there. There's 1.8 million teenagers in Australia, and our primary focus really is to try and get in front of those kids before someone offers, here's an ice pipe. And guess what they tell them? They don't say, here's an ice pipe and this is going to cause you psychosis and depression and anxiety and suicide. They say, this is the best drug ever invented. It's going to make you feel like Superman. We've been doing workshops in schools for the last 9 years all over in Western Australia, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, all through North Queensland. I can tell you that most of our workshops all through North Queensland and Western Australia were funded by Rotary clubs initially. So not ongoing, the Rotary Club would fund the first year, then the school would see what we presented and the school would then come in and fund it from then. So they're still going all through North Queensland based on the impetus that Rotary gave us back about 6 or 7 years ago. The feedback we get is quite incredible. They're not all 10, 10, 10, 10, but very much close to it. So we know we're making a difference. But the problem is that we have is, as you know, this is a big country and there's 1.8 million kids. So the cost of taking a presenter or two presenters generally, say to Townsville, we went to Townsville a couple of years ago and did Kerwin High School, there's 2,000 kids. But we've got to do them in groups of 60 to keep it interactive and sort of intimate. So that cost Kerwin High School's P&C nearly $18,000 to fly everyone up there, accommodation, meals, and being there for 2 weeks delivering, 40 or 50 workshops. So it's very prohibitive. Imagine if I said to you guys, can you come up with 18 grand, I want to do some workshops at Helensvale High School. It's out of the question. So what we've had to do is sort of go left field a little bit and come up with something different. So we've excuse me, developed an e-book, which is a digital document that has 11 people like Andrea who've come through addiction, telling their stories, talking about various aspects of addiction and recovery. The idea is basically for mums and dads to sit with their kids and take 45 minutes. There's 12 videos, there's like a minute and a half each at most. This young girl, Emma, when she was just turned 13, one of her friends gave her a pill.
I was introduced to ICE by a good friend of mine. She said, here, take this, and I swallowed it. I had no idea what it was. How quickly did I get addicted to ICE? Instantly. Within a year, I was 13 and I was addicted to ICE, smoking it every day. Coming down from ICE use was a really scary experience for me. I thought I was crazy. I really thought I was crazy. I would hear conversations people weren't having. I'd get angry at people for the conversations they weren't even having. I would cower in corners and not be able to physically just handle life. I'd see things, I'd hear things. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I'd look at myself in the mirror and not recognize who was staring back at me. But I was addicted and I couldn't stop. I just could not stop. I wouldn't sleep for days. I lost contact with all my family. So I didn't see any of my brothers and sisters or my parents. They both moved town, so I was alone during my addiction. I had no family or friends at the time. It was just me. It feels really good to be clean. I couldn't have done it by myself. I needed help and support from others. I really did. There's no way I would have been able to actually get off all drugs, not just ICE, but be able to be clean and sober. I'm nearly 2 years sober now, and I actually get to just live.
Here's a 12-year-old lad from Bundaberg who has sat with his mum and watched the e-book.
When I sat down and went through the Australian Anti-ICE Campaign e-book with my 12-year-old, it opened the door for informative conversations about the important issues surrounding drug use, namely methamphetamine. Not only that, he's able to then go and have those conversations with his mates and steer them against using the drug as well. He was engaged throughout the e-book. He found it very interesting and very informative. So I would recommend any parent that has children entering high school level to definitely go through the e-book with them and open the door to those important conversations. So far we have learnt about the different ingredients of, in ice. What do you think about that?
The ingredients are very dangerous.
We've also sat and listened to some of the stories from people that have used ice.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
It was very surprising how similar the stories were.
What would you say if someone offered you ice?
No, thank you.
Pretty much.
So what I'm learning from this is basically people get addicted fast, that you shouldn't even touch it once.
in 3 years' time he could be at a footy club or a party or hanging down the road with his mates. Because it doesn't have to be injected and just be smoke, someone's just got to say, here, have a puff of this, like they did with Andrea, to make you feel like Superman. He's got a chance to say, no, hang on a minute, I know what you're offering me and I know what it's going to do to me. If Emma had that happen to her when she was 12, she might have saved herself 5 or 6 years of turmoil and addiction. So that's what the e-book's about. So that's the document that we want to get into millions and millions of Australian parents' hands over the next year with this plan. We've got independent researchers right now finalising ethics approval to evaluate the whole e-book process, both from the parents' perspective of whether it was good to engage the kids or a good tool to engage the kids, and all of our case studies suggest that it is, but also just looking at how the kids' knowledge might have changed, whether they're aware of the consequences and what their intentions are in terms of ICE. So they might say, before I saw the e-book, I maybe would have, I don't know, but right now I know I never will. So those sorts of things can be measured by the researchers. Once we've got that, we want to try and get that e-book all over Australia, and because we don't have $6 million to run a national media campaign like the National Drugs Campaign did back in 2015. By the way, it was highly successful and hasn't been run since. But I think it cost $7 million for a 9-week campaign. We don't have that ability, so we're trying to use social media and organisations like yourselves to become community ambassadors to basically help us share this education and support material to your community, to your grandkids, to your nephews, your nieces, your sons, your daughters, all your friends, all your Facebook friends, any other associates you got. When we launch it nationally, we will target every business, sports club, community organisation and church in the country. Basically, this is what it will look like. So this is just an example or a sample of one of the social media posts. So, you know, Hope Island Rotary Club or Rotary Club of Hope Island, whatever it is, there's an AAIC Community Ambassador helping reduce the harms caused by ICE. And then you can click the link above to access free ICE-specific education and support. If we can have 10,000 community ambassadors around the country, all with that link repeatedly going up on there, and you know, there'll be other educational support materials that we can provide over time. But basically that's the idea, guys, is set people up as community ambassadors through posting that sort of stuff on their website, Facebook, you know, digital newsletter, sending it out to members through an email or a text. You can be sort of part of the solution. In terms of the media, we are looking to do some fundraising to get a professional media company. If any of you know somebody, please let me know. But, you know, Andrea has been featured in all of these things. Women's Day there, she's been on A Current Affair 3 times. I did a couple of 10-minute features on our schools program. Today Show, that was way back in 2016, I think. And all the national news. So Andrea, with her background, is very, what's the word, fluent and convincing and emotional and I guess persuasive. And you know, the media love talking to her because she's good at it. But we know that all of this media doesn't mean much. We need an organisation that can help coordinate it and give it some longevity as a campaign rather than me just ringing up, hey Lulu from A Current Affair, hey could you come and film our schools presentation? Oh yeah, okay. You know, very random. So we do need a professional media company to help. So that what we're doing, essentially to do that, we're asking 100 community organisations to support us as foundation community ambassadors, which means sharing all the material and doing everything I've talked about, but also just making a $500 donation once off. That gives us $50,000 in funding to get the evaluation finished. That's not going to cost a lot, but the ethics might cost $4,500. And also to get a national media organisation in to put a campaign together and basically run it. So by getting involved, you know, I would ask every one of you to get on the phone and ring your sons and daughters and nephews and nieces and say, you need to look at this e-book and sit down with your kids or your grandkids, and if they won't do it, drive around there and do it yourself. Sit down with them and say, mate, we've got to sit here for 45 minutes and I want to show you something. So yeah guys, that's about it. I know you don't make these sorts of decisions off the cuff and you've got to go back to your board, so I'm not going to ask you anything like that, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thanks for having me.